This is Gabriel Kempfer, and this is the course, the book of Genesis, and I'm doing module 4, the Joseph cycle, for on the STS method, which is a storytelling sermon. Thank you very much. See, I'd been locked up a few months when I met our Lord Zaphenath, Pania, in Pharaoh's royal prison. You see, but then I only knew my Lord only as Joseph. He was a kind Hebrew soul that was put in prison for the serious charge of attempted rape. Yes, the rape of our Lord Potiphar's wife. You see, Potiphar was the captain of our Pharaoh's official guards. Well, as anyone would expect from a prison, me, Asir, and Joseph became actually very good friends, if you may. It was there in prison I learned of my Lord's traumatic and actually heartbreaking story of how he actually ended up in Egypt, in Potiphar's house, and yes, in prison. You see, Joseph would talk about his family and how God made a covenant with his great grandfather Abram. God said to Abram that he's going to bless all nations through him and also through his offspring. When Joseph used to talk about his father, he said he loves his father, and he would always speak of him with a noticeable pain, a pain from longing to see him. You see, Joseph said it started all with a coat his father blessed him with, and to dreams he had about his parents and brothers bowing before him. You see, well, the symbols of his dreams of sheaves and celestial bodies weren't hard to guess what the dreams actually meant. But this was so serious that Joseph said that one day, by the instruction of his father, he went to his brothers in the valley of Hebron and found them near Dothan to see about their welfare. You see, it was there where his brothers wanted to kill him actually, but instead they threw him into a pit and later sold him to merchants who then sold him to the Lord Potiphar. You see, as anyone could actually imagine, the horror, disbelief, and tears was still present, as if our Lord Joseph was reliving the moment as he tried to fight through the pain and yet while continuing to tell the story. You see, as he was sold off, he could hear one of his brothers saying, "Dip his coat in the blood of a goat, that our father may think he was killed by an animal." Joseph said this broke him. The thought of knowing what this news will do to his father. You see, after this, Joseph said he would question God, why is this all happening to me? And what have I done to deserve such calamity and hatred? You see, Joseph said God was actually truly with him, even though he was in a place where he was not supposed to be. Things actually started to go well in the house of Potiphar. You see, before he knew, Potiphar trusted him with his whole household. But this is also when the problem started, Joseph said. You see, after all the success in Potiphar's house, the problem started. This time it was Potiphar's wife. Joseph explained that his master's wife started to continuously make sexual advances towards him, to the point that he confronted her by telling her he will never do such a thing to his master. And how could he do such an evil deed and sin against his God? You see, it got so bad that he was cornered one day by his master's wife, and he had no choice but to flee and leave his cloak behind to avoid that great sin. I couldn't help by this point to admire my Lord's integrity and strong resolve to not sin against his God. What a coincidence, I thought to myself, that his father's coat was the last thing his brothers used against him, and now his coat as a final evidence to his alleged rape accusation. You see, what was more surprising to me was, just like in the house of Potiphar, Joseph, in prison by now, was also in charge of all the prison duties and trusted wholeheartedly by Pharaoh's royal guards. See, after 2 years went by, the royal butler and baker was also in prison for misconduct by Pharaoh. But what was weird about this thing is that both of them, that first night, got weird dreams. You see, as they started to begin to tell the dreams, I was the first to call my Lord Joseph over to come and hear this bizarre type of dreams that nobody actually of us could understand. You see, after Joseph said what would happen to the cupbearer and the baker, I was at first a little bit skeptical, but later astounded after 3 days by the accuracy of the interpretation. You see, the cupbearer was reinstated to the presence of Pharaoh, and the baker, unfortunately, was hanged. You see, after my Lord Joseph earnestly requested the baker to remember him, it seemed by now, or by that time, He didn't remember because years has gone by and my Lord Joseph was still in prison. You see, even by that time, I was released and reinstated as an official guard again. I still remember my Lord Joseph turned 30, and as our relationship grew, not only as fellow inmates way back, but also now as a guard and a prisoner. I still remember one day I rushed to Joseph, telling him that Pharaoh wants to see him. Joseph asked why. I said, hurry up, my Lord Pharaoh wants to see you immediately. You see, not really absorbing what was really actually going on. My Lord Joseph is in front of Pharaoh. I thought to myself, only now the butler has remembered. As I stood eagerly close to hear this abrupt unfolding. You see, Joseph interprets the two dreams by saying something about a 7-year prosperity and a 7-year famine in Egypt. You see, after that, Joseph proceeds to advise the Pharaoh about how to appoint a wise governor to take a certain percentage of the produce and store it to counter the 7 years. Joseph proceeded to advise the Pharaoh about how to appoint a wise governor to take a certain percentage of the produce and store it to counter the 7 years of famine in Egypt. You see, my Lord Joseph is now second to the throne and in charge of the whole Egypt. You see, also his God allowed him to save not only many nations, but his family also. And what a dramatic and heartfelt reunion that was. You see, when Joseph revealed to his brothers who he was, and when they were bowing before him to secure food for their sustenance, how the palace was shaken with a wailing when Joseph and his brothers actually realized how their actions changed their brother's life and significantly also theirs. You see, Joseph's destiny was changed and also his brothers' hearts were changed. You see, through Joseph, Egypt was saved and blessed in excess, and also his family, who happened to settle in Goshen. I couldn't help but to think about God's plan for Joseph, how it started with calamity and brought salvation from famine to nations and the preserving of his covenant people. You see, we should be reminded to learn how to obey God in times of suffering, testing, and yes, even calamity. When we find ourselves in an awful place, especially through the hands of others, it may just be God's sovereign hand at work to accomplish His will and blessing through our lives. You see, as I'm reflecting of the STS method and the whole experience, my plans actually to preach the story at church was sadly derailed by whole miscommunication, and I ended up not doing the sermon, but I was content to know that nothing happens without God's sovereign will in action. But I did, however, exercise the story to work colleagues, which was a good experience, seeing that they are not born again and not familiar with the whole biblical story. You see, the response evoked a lot of questions and interest around the story, but especially the misconception of God being good. Why does bad things happen to good people? Again, the story proved to be an excellent example of how God's plans are greater than our circumstances that may befall us. You see, faith in God, especially through bad times, will surely be greatly rewarded if we endure to the end. And as I'm pondering now upon my personal impression about this whole experience, I must admit that I wish I had done this course and material a long time ago, actually. My impatience in times of difficulty, sometimes I have to admit, gets the best of me. It also happens that I'm going through one of the most trying times of my life, I think. And it says if I am doing this course by divine guidance because I am so inspired to endure now, even if I want to give up. I've just learned through this course that God is faithful if I don't lose faith and integrity. I just want to thank all my facilitators for your support, for your prayers, and also for your guidance through this whole experience. I wish to thank each and every one of you and be blessed. Thank you.